I read the note, but was it really necessary to send it? I mean,
It's not
I,
not to discuss here. I was just making sure everyone's seen it.
no, okay.
Okay, I'm ready to go.
Thank you.
I would like to welcome members, officers, and members of the public to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. And a very, very belated Happy New Year to the committee members. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, if a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the Chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the Chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. Voting, when requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the Chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we proceed? No, back to you then, Chair.
Thank you, James. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have received no apologies for absence. And is now, are we all here? I think we are. 2, minutes of the 11th of December and the 18th of December 2025 meetings. Unless there are any objections, I plan on taking both sets of minutes in one vote. I would like to propose we take as read and approve as true record the minutes of the meeting held on 11th of December and 18th of December 2025. May I have a seconder? I'll take a seconder and then I'll... Yep.
Happy to second, Chair.
Councillor Fernandez. Are there any comments on the minutes from 11th of December or 18th of December 2025? Councillor McDonnell. Karen.
I wasn't here on the 11th of December, so can I still vote on the two together or?
No.
I wasn't here on either of them, so I'll...
Then you should abstain. Yeah.
We missed you anyway. Do we have any?
Just, I wasn't going to say this, but just one
Very
minor
helpful.
point. Myself and Councillor McDonald didn't attend on the 18th because we couldn't sit on that item because it was the only item on the agenda and it had been deferred and we weren't on the deferral. And there's nothing on the minutes to say that. It's a bit, I feel like it looks like we just didn't bother showing up and it's not really that. I don't know if there's any way of recording that. That's just a question for, I'm not going to make an issue of it, but just a
I
question.
think it's a very, very fair point.
Okay.
Yeah, is there any way we can?
Unfortunately not, no. So your apologies are just apologies given for the meeting. Yeah, we wouldn't necessarily, the minutes are then the reflection of the meeting that took place. So we wouldn't, include reasons. We wouldn't do it for any other apologies, as you can imagine. So yeah, apologies, we can't do that.
Does it come into the minutes of this one? Because we've just said it.
Yeah, potentially could come into the minutes of this one. Yes, yeah.
Right. Are there any further comments on the two sets of minutes? In which case, if we could move to a vote on approving the minutes, all those in favour?
Thank you, Chair. That motion's carried.
Thank you. Item 3, notification of other business. There is none. Item 4, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Declaration of interest. Members are reminded to make declaration of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the Chair's announcement on the agenda. To clarify matters for the registered speakers, thank you to members of the public for joining us this evening. To confirm, you will have between 3 and 5 minutes, as advised by the committee services team, to make your verbal presentation to the committee. All speakers will receive a warning when you have 1 minute remaining. Following the conclusion of your time, members will be invited to ask points of clarification. At the end of your allotted time, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and you must cease. 4, debate procedure. In order to move to a debate on an item, we will require a proposer and a seconder for a motion at the appropriate time in the meeting. This should take into account the information in the officer's report and will follow the officer's presentation and any public presentations, including member advocates, as well as any questions of the officer and points of clarification for the public presenters. As a reminder for members, should you wish to propose a motion contrary to the recommendations included in the officer's report, you will be required to provide clear and evidence reasons for this proposal. 5. Section 4.8.23a. For the purpose of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. 6. Meeting cut-off. As outlined under 4.8.24g of the Council's Constitution, if the meeting proceeds to 10:30 p.m, the item being considered at that time will be the final item considered at tonight's meeting. The remaining business will be deferred to the next meeting on Thursday, the 12th of February 2026. 7. Change in agenda order. I've agreed a change in tonight's agenda order, and the item 10, Planning Enforcement Part 2, will take place ahead of item 8, Planning Enforcement Part 1. There is a logic to it. For the members of the public, you might be bemused by that. 5. Public participation. For item 6, I have Nikki Holmes, Mike Holmes, and Parish Councillor Norton May. And at which point we can move on to item 6, application 2502115 FP, Kirby Manor Farm, Northfield Road, Ashwell, Baldock, Hertfordshire. A supplementary document has been published containing submissions received from neighbours, Ashwell Parish Council and the North Herts ecologist following the agenda publication. Can I confirm that members of the committee are aware and have had time to review this supplement? And the offer was going to be, if you hadn't done that, I was prepared to allow time now for you to read it. We've all seen it. Fine, then we'll proceed. May I ask Henry Thomas to present the officer's report?
Good evening, members. So all my updates were included in that update report, and I've got nothing further to add. So we can go straight to the presentation, please. Lovely. Next slide, please. So this is an application for the conversion of 3 agricultural barns into 8 residential units, which includes gardens, parking, and vehicle access. Next slide, please. So Kirby Manor Farm is in a rural position outside the settlement boundary for Ashwell, and it's located within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt. So this is the view of the primary access from Northfield Road. The building on the right comprises of units 1 and 3, and then the building to the rear will be units 5 to 8. Next slide, please. This is another view of unit 3. Next slide, please. This is a view of units 5 to 8. Next slide, please. This is the view looking south towards the neighbouring dwelling of Kirby Manor Farm, and that's unit 4 in front of it. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation of units 5 to 8. Next slide, please. This is a photo taken from the southeast boundary of the site, looking towards unit 4 and the neighbouring dwelling to the left. Lovely. Next slide. This is a photo of units 2 and 3 taken while standing in the proposed garden of unit 2. Next slide, please. And then this is the reverse of that photo, looking towards the neighbouring dwelling. Next slide, please. And this is a photo taken within the proposed garden of Unit 1. Unit 1's the building on the left, Unit 3 lies ahead, and Unit 2 to the right. Next slide, please. And then this is the reverse of that view, looking towards the neighbouring dwelling. The proposal seeks to partly remove and repurpose the former pigsty building, which into a bin store, which is the building you can see at the end of the photograph with the vines draping over, which sits on the boundary with the neighbour. Next slide, please. And then this is the photo of the second access, which would serve solely Unit 1. Next slide, please. So this is the site plan which was approved under the previous P&Q application. So under permitted development rights for Class Q conversions, there's a limitation on the curtilage of a building in relation to the size of the building itself. As such, the units have got quite small gardens. Next slide, please. And then this is for comparison, the current proposed site plan. The internal configuration, design and elevations of the building remain consistent with the previous application. However, the proposal seeks to give each plot a larger garden area and a slight reconfiguration to the parking area. Next slide, please. So these are the elevation plans for units 1, 2 and 3. The top drawing is the view from the neighbouring dwelling to the south. And then the next two are the side elevations of units 1 and 2 as they would face towards each other. Next slide, please. And then these are the other elevations of units 1, 2 and 3. From top to bottom, they are the front elevation of unit 1, as would be seen from Northfield Road. The front elevation of unit 3, which would be visible when entering the site on the right. And lastly, the view of unit 2 as seen from the parking court. Next slide, please. And then these are the elevation plans for the proposed bin store along the southern boundary of the site. From top to bottom, they show the view towards the neighbouring dwelling with the proposed tree plantings, the view of the neighbour's gate, bin store enclosure, vehicle access and part of unit 1 for that one in the middle. And then the last one is the view from the neighbour's side looking into the site. Next slide, please. So these are the elevations for unit 4. From left to right to bottom, these are the western, northern and eastern elevations. Next slide, please. And this is the front elevation of unit 5 to 8, and then the north side elevation, which is facing away from the neighbouring dwelling. Next slide, please. And finally, the last one. And this is the rear elevation followed by the south side elevation. And last slide, please. And then this is a visualization of the site to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Before I invite members to ask any questions of the planning officer, I've got one. Henry, could you remind everyone what curtilage means?
So that's the area around the dwelling, including garden and parking.
Thank you. Do other members have any other questions for the officer? Councillor Winstanley. Dave.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for that. In relation to curtilage, so in the existing plans, the gardens were smaller. Was there a reason for that in the original plan? Was that a contentious matter, or I'm just trying to work out why it's now coming back with bigger gardens?
Is in my view, a strange idiosyncrasy of the permitted development order that under Class Q, the extent of the residential curtilage is limited to no more than the floor space of the building which is going to be converted to a dwelling. So you end up with rather small garden areas to serve what sometimes are fairly large dwellings. And dwellings of a size where you'd normally expect to have larger gardens because they're often be family housing, but the gardens are quite small. And that's a limitation of the General Permitted Development Order under Class Q, which allows for the change of use of vacant farm buildings to dwelling houses. It is quite common under such cases that at a later date, future occupiers often apply for planning permission to extend their garden because there's usually lots of space around them, or they do it anyway and don't apply for planning permission is quite common. So in this instance, so that my understanding is so that the properties can be marketed with the larger gardens, they've applied for planning permission, whereas they already have approval under the General Permitted Development Order under Class Q, albeit with the limited garden sizes.
Yeah. Can I just come back on one point on that? Thank you very much. That's brilliant. So tonight, regardless of the outcome, they can develop this into 8 dwellings. If we, regardless of so if we reject this application tonight, for example, they can still build the 8 dwellings, but it will be with the smaller gardens. If we approve tonight, it will be the 8 dwellings, the bigger gardens.
Yes, that's correct. There's an extant consent for 8 dwellings on this site, and there's 2 years left for them to complete that development. The permitted development prior approval was given about a year ago, I believe. So they could implement the approved scheme with the smaller gardens, and that is what is called the fallback position.
Yeah.
Because they do have prior approval, based upon various appeal decisions and case law, officers are given significant weight to that fallback position. Where does the fallback position that you give significant weight to? You don't compare the scheme against what's there at the moment. You would normally compare the scheme against what is approved.
Yeah.
And the differences between one and the other is what you're assessing under such circumstances.
Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have Councillor Ruth Brown.
Well, that's very convenient because my question follows on from that. So I don't really quite understand Class Q, but I think it's something to do with agricultural buildings that can just be converted as long as the footprint is not, or the built form is not increased. Is that right? But my question is really, what are the main differences apart from the gardens? I see under 4.3.5 that there is a bit of an extension. So how much additional built form is there compared with the Class Q one that's already been approved?
Recent changes to the General Permitted Development Order did allow for more dwellings to be converted under Class Q, and did allow for the enlargement of the buildings as well. It didn't change the size of garden that you're permitted to have. So there's no differences between the approved scheme and the proposal in terms of the appearance and size of the buildings. The only differences between the approved scheme and the current proposal that's before you is the size of the location and size of gardens and the parking arrangement.
Can I just come back on that? It says there's a minor extension to Unit 4.
That was part,
that was included in the
that was included in the prior approval.
Oh, that was included in the prior approval. Okay, I didn't understand that.
Because
Okay, thank you very much.
Change to the
So that's no different from the prior approval.
That's no different from the
Okay.
approval, because the General Permitted Development was changed to give a little bit more flexibility under Class Q to allow some minor enlargements and more dwellings to be converted under that class.
So the built form's no different from the.
That's correct.
No,
That's
okay,
my
thank you.
understanding. We have checked that, and that's our understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Our understanding is that the applicant decided to apply for this because they wanted to
Because of the
market it with
gardens.
larger gardens and a different parking arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tom Tyson. Tom.
Yeah, oh, and Chair, I was going to mention at the start that this application site is in my ward, but I'm sitting on the committee, as I don't believe I'm predetermined on this. Although I have been on site and have had conversations with the neighbours, but haven't predetermined myself, I believe. So I've got a question about the Class Q versus the full application process. Are there any considerations for the full application that we're looking at tonight which weren't taken into consideration because it was in the previous approval, because the prior approval under Class Q didn't require those considerations to be taken into account?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak on this one. Yeah, so under the P&Q, the permitted development rights, we couldn't take into consideration any impact on neighbouring amenity. And it's also important to note, because highways have objected to this development, and they also use the same objection to the previous P&Q scheme. And under the P&Q, we couldn't accept an objection on sustainability grounds from the highways. So those are the differences.
So is it fair to assume that those, for example, those two elements, those aspects would be fair to be considered as material considerations this evening?
Yes, they can, but within the consideration of comparing it to the valid fallback position. So if my view on this is that if we were considering a completely fresh application, and also if we're considering completely new development, not conversions of existing buildings, then we'll probably be resisting new housing development in this location. But that's not the circumstance here. What we can't ignore, and what is an important material consideration to which officers have been given significant weight, is the fallback position against which we're comparing it. Now, as part of that fallback scheme, we didn't consider the impact upon amenity, residential amenity, and also in terms of highways as concerned, the sustainability of the location. Under Class Q, for us to resist a Class Q, it would have to be in a particularly isolated location, far from anything, so that access to it and use of it would be unviable. In other words, well away from a highway, for example, in the middle of a moor, would probably conversion to Class Q probably would not be permitted. So that's the background to it. As we know, we now have a planning application where impact upon residential amenity and the sustainability of the location are material considerations. But as I said earlier, we have to compare this scheme, or we should compare this scheme, against the fallback position. And when you compare this scheme against the fallback position, there's already consent for 8 dwellings. There's already consent for the conversion of these buildings. What we should be comparing is the differences of that scheme to what's currently before us in terms of its effect on all those considerations that we can now consider under an application for planning permission.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sean. Do we have any further questions to the officers? Councillor Bryan.
Thank you. I was reading the letter sent in by the neighbours who were asking for the dwellings to be built in White Halsey brick. Was this material which actually has the fallback position uses?
Yeah. So these they've reused the same plans. So these are identical floor layout, elevations, materials.
This is an objection. That's been mentioned as far as, because it actually says on 4.22 the walls are rendered.
Yes, my understanding is that they intend to keep the existing bricks, which are not in the best condition, and so they're proposing to render them. So they're not replacing the walls with new bricks; they're rendering the existing bricks, which is why render is proposed, so that it's more sustainable to use the existing structure rather than. Well, they wouldn't be able to demolish, and they're not proposing to demolish and rebuild. They're proposing to convert the buildings, and as part of that, they're proposing a render along a fair amount of the existing walls. That's what was approved, and that's what we're comparing this scheme against. So, whilst if we didn't have that fallback position, I might be considering that I wouldn't necessarily be supportive of the red colour to the render, for example, the red brick colour to the render, and probably would prefer a buff colour that would more reflect the colour of the existing bricks. But that's what's been approved under the prior approval.
Thank you.
You're heading for that button, Councillor Tyson.
Yes, I don't want to prolong this too long, but there is Sean, what you've just said raises the question of why was it approved then and is now the fallback position if you would have been minded to query it if there had been no fallback position that set that as the precedent? Why was it approved last time around?
Were you involved? Alex said it initially.
I don't recall being involved in the prior approval, so I can't say why it was approved in that sense. All I can say, it was approved, and that's the fallback against which we're considering it. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and you might change things with hindsight, but that's what the scheme that received prior approval.
Okay.
Okay. I have no further questions. May I ask the committee services or anybody else, is anybody else finding it insufferably hot in here? Is it at all possible before I bring the public speakers, we could adjust the heating downwards? Thank you. Thank you for indulging me in that. Right. Then I would like to call the first two public speakers are Nikki Holmes and Mike Holmes. You both have 3 minutes. Then is there any reason at all why I can't change it around? So that's Councillor May, yes? Yeah, because what I was going to say is I can do it in separate ways. You could each do your 3 minutes, and then the members can ask questions of you individually, or I could take 2 of you. I was understanding that 2 of you were doing it as a group, and then and ask questions. I'm in your hands really, whichever you're comfortable with. So we'll start off. I'll take your.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I think it'd be better if I started.
Yes, we'll do your 3 minutes, and then we'll take any questions to you, and then I'll decide how to do it with the other 2 speakers. So, Councillor May, you have 3 minutes, and I will let you know when you have a minute left.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Ashwell Parish Council objects to this application. In summary, it considers the developments unacceptable for the following reasons. The site's outside the settlement boundary of the village, in land beyond the green belt, and by a long way for what is Hertfordshire, that is. The location isn't sustainable, not from a transport point of view, and this is something also stated by HCC's Highways Department. And also the access to the location is unsafe as well. And again, Hertfordshire County Council's Highways Department have pointed this out too, and they have objections on these grounds. So those are the main objections. Now, as we've heard, there's been a prior permitted development consent under Class Q. But Ashwell Parish Council maintains that this application should be considered separate from and as a standalone, apart from the Class Q consent. Why? Well, this application is not asking to vary the consent at all, so can't be linked to it for that reason. Nor does it really meet the criteria for betterment. The current application is extending the building and the development, not the building, sorry, the development well beyond the curtilage of the existing buildings to create a suburbanized environment that's really at odds with its surroundings. Now, that can't be described as betterment. It can't be described as an enhancement of the immediate surroundings and existing buildings. Now, the Planning Office talked about a fallback position. That is, I'm assuming if I've understood correctly, that if the application isn't granted, then the Class Q development will go ahead, and there's no real difference in the harms that either of these developments would cause. Well, Ashwell Parish Council rejects this argument. I mean, Class Q has strict rules for developing, including keeping it within the existing curtilage. And the idea is to minimise the harm in areas that are often sensitive development. And certainly in this case, the area is sensitive.
Seconds left up. I missed the prompt. But.
So it's also worth pointing out that the development won't necessarily go ahead anyway if the application isn't approved, because why would the developer ask for a new application to be approved when they've already got consent in the first place? Possibly because they don't want to build according to the Class Q consent. Finally, speculation about future extensions to the property is just that, it's speculation, and I think that should be ignored. So this application ought to be considered purely on its own without reference to any prior approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And apologies, I messed your prompt up. Do the committee have any points of clarification for the public speaker, please? No? In which case, we'll move on to our other two public speakers. Are you happy for me to take one at a time and then ask for questions? Is that
Questions at the end of both, because we're basically delivering two halves.
sure?
That's okay.
Do you want to run through the whole time, or should I stop you after 3 minutes and 3 minutes?
Stop after 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll be as gentle as possible in doing that.
Thank you.
And I will try and remind you when you've got
And I
a
was
bit left.
speaking fast.
Okay, so Nikki Holmes, thank you. Your 3 minutes.
We are the owners and occupiers of the Victorian farmhouse immediately adjoining the barns. While the principle of conversion was previously accepted under Class Q, that process did not access the full impacts of residential occupation to ensure a new development doesn't unduly harm existing homes. We understand Class Q constraints prevented proper consideration of gardens, residential activity and boundary relationships. We also understood that Class Q was granted excluding gardens for proposed units 5 to 8 due to curtilage constraints, which is why full planning permission has now been applied for. Privacy and residential amenity. The proposal results in direct overlooking into our bedrooms from new dwellings and gardens and parking area. Unit 3 windows look into and can be overlooked from our downstairs sitting room. This will result in issues of noise, light disturbance and privacy. The scheme fails to consider design alternatives, such as reorienting windows away from our dwelling or relocating parking or restricting lighting or obscuring window treatments, all of which could reduce overlooking and disturbance. We consider that collectively this represents unacceptable harm to our living conditions. Boundary wall. The proposed boundary wall directly behind our farmhouse is currently inadequate at 2 metres due to a 0.6 metre level difference between our drive and the proposed site. The wall needs to be 2.5 metres high, measured on our side to provide screening and garden noise reduction, and built in the existing RZ white bricks. This requirement needs to be continued to the proposed wall around the whole of our northern boundary. Noise, lighting and overdevelopment. The introduction of 8 dwellings, potentially up to 40 residents and 20 parking spaces, creates a significant increase in activity. This represents an over-intensive form of development, dominating the rural setting and amplifying noise and disturbance to existing homes. No lighting assessment has been submitted and cumulative impacts have not been addressed. Highways and access. We fully support the Highways Authority objection. We believe that the applicant's traffic estimates significantly understate movements for the proposed development. The access lane is narrow, muddy, ungritted, without pull-ins and used by large agricultural vehicles and cars, often driving too fast for the conditions. We know from personal experience that it's unsafe to cycle or walk along this lane with buggies, children or dogs. These matters remain unassessed.
I'll just wait for us to reset the clock. Okay, if I can ask Mike Holmes, Mike, you have 3 minutes and I'll let you know when you have a minute left.
Yep. Deliverability and essential infrastructure. Adjoining barn. One barn adjoins our dwelling with part of it on our land. There is no construction method statement, no structural survey and no vibration assessment and no drainage information, creating real risk to our Victorian home. The farmyard is entirely concreted over, and for gardens to be developed, this would require removal of the concrete, and also the demolition work has also been included on the proposal. Our farmhouse was built in 1850 and as such will not have the foundations of modern property. No structural assessment, pre and post development, vibration assessment and risk assessment for the structural integrity of our home has been proposed. Water supply. The application contains no information about supplying 8 new dwellings. The only existing supply is a private pipe running the length of our garden to the farmyard beyond, resulting in frequent drops in pressure. No assessment of capacity, protection or separation has been provided. Oil tank. The domestic oil tank for our farmhouse sits within the application site. There is no protection or relocation plan, risking loss of heating and hot water to our dwelling. If any of these are not relevant under the planning regulations, we would appreciate guidance as to which aspects should be referred to other departments or dealt with as civil matters. Design, layout and character. The proposed scheme introduces urban domestic features, materials inconsistent with vernacular, including walls painted red in line of sight of our dwelling, as well as layout choices, parking courts that harm the historic agricultural character of Kirby Manor Farm, which is a Victorian development built in the local Yellowstone Arlesey bricks. No alternatives have been proposed to reduce impacts, such as reducing dwelling numbers, relocating parking, or retaining the character of the development in keeping with existing buildings. This application, in conclusion, has not demonstrated that it can be delivered without harm. It impacts on privacy, noise, lighting, overdevelopment, design, character, highways, water supply, oil tank protection and structural safety remain unresolved. We understand that under policies D1, D3 and SP1, these matters must be satisfactorily addressed before permission is granted. We therefore ask you to refuse this planning application. But if you're not minded to do so, we request you to please take into account all of our concerns that we have raised and impose relevant conditions to overcome them. We have made a number of requests to mitigate the impact to our residential amenity in objection letters. We are aware that there is provision for some conditions in the update report of 19th of January, but do not feel these cover all areas. We would request to be included in discussion, recommendations and decisions around conditions pertaining directly to our dwelling and residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for both being so timely. Members, do we have any points of clarification, questions to the last two public speakers? Councillor Prescott.
It's not questions to the public speakers, but questions to the officer in direct response to matters that have been raised by the public speakers. If these matters are, and of course were, the same with the previous application, the application that was approved, why were they not addressed? I mean, the situation of the oil tank being within the boundary of the development site seems bizarre.
Just to interrupt you, we will return to questions to the officers afterwards. So just to keep it in order.
Okay.
Councillor Peace.
Can I just ask, so we've been presented with this situation where we have a fallback position and this new application, and the difference is the area of the gardens. Is there anything specifically in the increase in the area of the gardens that you object to, as opposed to the fallback position?
Sorry.
The other way.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. So if I could invite, well, either Mike or Nikki, if you'd like to respond to that question.
Okay, so as we understand it, the gardens in the Class Q approval, the gardens for units 5 to 8 were not included because you could either have the parking or you could have the gardens because of the curtilage issue. Therefore, the red line was around the barns directly behind us, including their gardens and the parking area, and then the building, the big building for units 5 to 8. It was not around the gardens. So therefore, those gardens were not included, as we understand it, in that planning permission, which is why we understand it that has now gone for full planning. I'm not sure if that answers your question or
not quite. I think what I was trying to get at is what effect does that change have on you? The increase in the gardens and the change in the configuration.
What does it have on us? Well, I think it's the whole thing taken together because as we've talked about overlooking, we've talked about light, we've talked about noise and all the rest of it. It's the whole thing, and the parking, which is directly into our bedroom windows, and all the rest of it. That's where the big problem comes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bryant. Val.
Just following on from that, the suggestion that the wall should be increased to 2.8 metres, would that solve the problem?
The wall we're talking about, okay, the wall is along the whole of our northern boundary. directly behind our house where the pigsties are, which were mentioned are going to become the bin storage, I think, that's 2.8 metres high. The bit that goes then directly behind our house is significantly lower. So the highest that can be is 2.5 metres because of the eaves of the adjoining barn, which is also going to be developed and is partly on our side as well. So that's why I was saying to put it there. That will then mitigate noise to a certain extent. We hope that there's no noise assessment between those gardens which are directly behind us. All we have is a driveway from our house and then the development. So there's nothing more. So there's a lot going on there. And then we have also suggested that the 2.5 metres should be down the whole of the northern boundary, because it then carries on to where our side garden is, which is where the big barn, if you like, is being developed, so that we have 2.5 metres all the way along our boundary in the RZ Whites, which is in keeping with our property and all the other buildings, including those barns, until they paint them red.
Okay. Any other questions from? In which case, I have one, if I may ask the public speakers. Since, as been mentioned, this essentially is about extending the gardens. If we go back to the fallback position, what would there be in the place that where the extended gardens would be if this application goes through?
The extended gardens, are we talking about giving gardens to units 5 to 8, or are we talking about extending the gardens to units 1 to 4?
I was referring to the gardens we were just talking about.
To 5 to 8. So sorry, what would it be otherwise?
Yeah. I'm just trying to clarify, but it may be a question better aimed at the office.
At the moment, it's hard standing. So you've got the big barn with hard standing all around it. That's what's there at the moment. It's all part. Yeah, it's all part of the curtilage.
The gardens are more taking away from the countryside, suburban, the environment.
Yeah, it is. It is. There's a lot of. It is making the whole area quite suburban with the whole development and everything that comes with it.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions, or else we will go back to the officers? Councillor Tyson.
Just to try and recap on that, Nikki. First of all, I think there seems to have been a slight sort of misunderstanding due to the use of the term extended gardens. These are not gardens that exist at the moment. They would be installed. They are new gardens, on units 4, 8 and 7, which were contiguous with the neighbour's garden. Is that right? They would be brand new gardens, not extensions to something that is already built.
Yeah, because it's all hardcore at the moment.
Yes.
Everything's it's all hard standing. The whole area is completely concrete at the moment. Yeah.
And can I just confirm that what you're asking for is that the proposed boundary wall in the site plan is not 2 metres as stated there, but becomes a wall of 2.5 metres?
And measured from our side, particularly behind our house, because of the drop going into the farmyard.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
The application in front of us. Yep. In which case, I will return to the officers for anything they may wish to add.
Thank you, Chair. To assist with regards to the last few points of clarification, the areas where the proposed garden would be what is there at the moment, which is the concrete that you saw on the photographs. As far as the boundary is concerned, in the update, an additional condition 12 is proposed, which indicates that notwithstanding the details of proposed boundary, further details shall be submitted with regard to the boundary treatment, which can make provision for the current landscaping scheme shows that boundary, but it doesn't indicate what height it would be, and therefore that condition would allow this council, the officers, to control the height of that boundary and require it to be a particular height, taking into account what the neighbours have said.
Thank you. Henry, did you have anything you wish to add to the?
No, I've got nothing further to add to that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Brown, you're indicating.
Yes, I was just wanting to ask a question of the officers about the water supply and what presumably Affinity Water haven't responded, but presumably they're expected to put in a water supply. I don't know.
Yes, it's a matter that's covered by the Water Industry Act, and the water suppliers will be mandated to provide an adequate water supply to new dwellings. That's a requirement in law, and it's a matter covered by building regulations as well. There will have to be an adequate water supply and sewage for all new dwellings that is controlled by building regulations. So it's not a matter that we control, but the Water Act and the building regulations control such matters.
Thank you.
Councillor Prescott, Martin.
Thank you. Sorry for raising this at the wrong point earlier on. The question or the point that was made by one of the speakers about the oil tank being within the development site, so their oil tank is on someone else's land effectively. How has that been addressed in either of the applications?
It is a civil matter and therefore isn't addressed under the Land Use Planning Acts. It's a civil matter between the two owners of the the owner of the oil tank, which will be the neighbours, and the owner of the land, which will be the owner of this application site. So it's not a matter that we as local planning authority would be involved in. It's a civil matter between the two parties.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right in front of me. I'm always looking at Ruth. That's the problem. So I always pick on Ruth. Councillor Winstanley.
Yeah. Can I just in the applicant isn't here, in the design and access statement, it says ample opportunity for solar. Heat pumps could be considered. So I presume that's going to be put onto the occupiers as to whether they want to retrofit those at any point. Are they conditions that we could potentially apply tonight?
Sure.
Not necessarily. The design and access statement addresses it, but not in any great detail. No. They don't refer to our SPD in the submission. So they will have to comply with building regulations, which in our SPD, as set out in the report, is the bronze level. So they are advocating a building first approach in terms of the structure providing the insulation. But they've also indicated that in order to building regulations requirements, they will consider all of these other matters such as PV panels, air heat source pumps, etc. So provided they meet building regulations, it's not something that we can require them to go any further on. They can go further if they wish to, but they've not indicated a wish to do so. They've just indicated an intention possibly to put in PV panels and air heat source pumps, along with the structural insulation measures that is the main way of meeting building regulations.
Yeah. Sorry, one other thing, and I think I read this in the report that there are EV chargers. Is that right?
That's also now a requirement of building regulations, which is why we don't recommend imposing the condition anymore, because building regulations was changed to require provision of EV charging points for all new dwellings. Yeah. So there's no point in duplicating these matters.
That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Peace.
So given that the neighbours have got an oil tank on this site, does that suggest that there's no gas supply to this area and that the new dwellings would have to be built with oil-fired central heating if they didn't have a air source heat pump?
Yeah, they would not have gas boilers. They probably rely upon air heat source pumps in any event, which is what is generally encouraged these days, being a more sustainable means of heating your home than compared to gas boilers.
But would building control sign off oil-fired central heating?
Highly unlikely, I'd have thought,
Yeah.
because that would make it rather difficult to achieve building regulations. I can't imagine a future occupier or the builders wanting to put in oil-fired heat means of heating the homes. It would most likely be air heat or air source heat pumps.
Councillor Mantle.
Are there any conditions attached to the default, the fallback position, and compared with the application we have before us?
Yes, there are. In fact, most of the conditions that are recommended in the main report are duplicates of the conditions on the private property.
Thank you.
Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I'm looking at the supplementary agenda, the conditions that Henry's attached since the original report was published. And number 11 about the lighting. Is there any way that we can be a bit more specific about what kind of lighting would be acceptable in this very isolated rural location, how that would be controlled, whether there's a condition that could be imposed maybe to preclude the use of motion activated security lights, which would be very bright and intrusive, both in terms of residents' amenity and the environment. Is there something can we find something a bit more specific in that section?
Yes, if members wish for it to be more specific, we could, for example, say in this condition that details of the lighting shall be submitted, but shall preclude the provision of motion sensor lighting, for example. It could be inserted into that condition.
And is it, I don't know if it's common practice or not, to have some kind of time limitation on, would there be lighting in the sort of communal parking area?
That could, that would normally be part and parcel of a scheme to be submitted in terms of operation. The condition could be also amended to say including the hours of lighting operation, if members so wished it to be.
Thank you.
Tom.
While I'm on the subject of conditions, we talked about the boundary wall. Is it possible to condition a height of 2.5 metres for the new sections of wall?
I think what we need to do is look at the structural integrity of the wall before we say it has to be of a particular height. I wouldn't want to be requiring a particular height to a wall without knowing whether that would be viable from a structural point of view. It's not clear to me also who actually owns the wall, whether it's the applicant or the neighbour. So we'd obviously want to clarify that before or with any submitted details.
Okay.
Okay. So I've heard several what might be suggestions for recommendations. We would need those to be proposed and seconded and voted on if the committee was so minded to include them, the conditions rather.
I'm happy to propose whatever it was I just proposed. I can't remember the exact one.
I think for the officer's benefit, you probably need to be slightly more clear on what exactly it is you wish to propose. If you wish to take a second to arrange the wording,
it was on the lighting. It was to do with the preclusion of motion activated security lighting, which is generally very bright, and also to specify the times of operation of any communal lighting in the parking area or elsewhere.
Okay. I'm looking at the officers. Do we think that is wording that is sustainable?
Yes, what we could do, and I'm just reading out, I'll read out with the condition as currently worded and seek to insert into that wording. So the current wording says, prior to the installation of external lighting, full details including height, and then we can insert hours of operation, design, location of the lighting, and the details shall not include any motion sensors within the scheme. Or words to that effect. We'll probably tighten up on the wording. So it refer to the we require details of hours of operation and preclude motion sensors within that wording.
Okay,
that's fine. I'm just hesitant slightly because first of all, you missed out the word intensity in. I think you just inadvertently skipped over that, but that's obviously
that's
one of the
later
most
on.
important
Yeah.
elements of this, and also providing details of that doesn't automatically satisfy the concern that it will be too bright and an imposition on the immediate environment.
Yeah, it's covered by the reason insofar as what's the reason for the condition.
Okay.
And that's partly the protection of neighbour amenity. So we'll be looking at that reason in terms of what details we will approve.
Oh, fine. Okay. Yeah.
If we're happy with the wording on that, I've Councillor Brown, who I think may be looking to second. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'm happy to second that condition. I also wondered whether we could add another condition around obscured glass, because the neighbour talked about overlooking and loss of privacy. I wonder if there are any elements, any windows that could be obscured glass. I mean,
Ruth,
Yeah.
can I suggest we do one amendment
one at a time.
or we're gonna,
Okay.
Is that
Yeah,
fine?
yeah, that's fine.
So you.
I'll
So we have
second that one.
Councillor Tyson
Second the
recommending
lighting. Yeah.
and that's seconded by Councillor Brown. Sean, you happy with the wording?
Sorry.
Content with the wording around the lighting, Councillor
Yes.
Tyson's proposal, so we know what we're voting on.
Yes.
Does the committee know what it's voting on? Right, in which case can we vote? Who is in favour of the? Sorry.
Councillor Tyson is proposing to grant permission with that addition, with that amended condition 11. If Councillor Brown wants to make a further amendment or additional condition, and Councillor Tyson is willing to accept that as the proposer, we're not amending anything because we don't have a proposal at the moment. This is what Councillor Tyson is proposing. We grant permission subject to the amendment to condition 11 regarding lighting, which is to be seconded by Councillor Brown.
I thought we would vote on the amendment. And
We
then,
don't have anything to amend is the point. So you,
yeah, we don't. No, we don't, yeah. You're quite right, James. I'm listening.
So you've made the proposal. Sorry, do you want to go? Yes.
Sorry, James. I think it's not to, it's if the committee were minded to grant the permission for it to include the amended condition 11, but obviously it's within the gift of the committee members how they vote. So it's if the committee were minded to vote in favour, it would be an amended condition 11. Is that okay?
Right. On that note, I have Councillor in Mantle.
The point I was trying to clarify, it's only by approving this application that we can amend any of the conditions. That's why I asked the question before. If we don't approve the application and the fallback position applies, that has to be with the conditions that were originally attached to that when it was granted, and we can't change them. Am I correctly understanding?
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. I just wanted to be absolutely clear. We knew what we were voting with as amended. We are. My understanding is we would need to vote on the full proposal as amended. Is that correct, Nazanin?
So at the moment, Councillor Tyson has proposed an amendment to condition 11 in respect of lighting, and we have a seconder by Councillor Brown. So that is if the committee were minded to grant, the substantive vote would include the amendment to condition 11. But for now, there's a proposer and a seconder to an amendment to condition 11, and we will vote on that amendment alone. And then the substantive motion that has been forwarded and seconded for the permission itself, we are not voting on that right now.
Okay.
Keep going.
Councillor Tyson.
I would still like to propose an amendment to condition 12 about the boundary treatment.
Yeah.
Do we do that all in one? Then we'd have to do it separately, wouldn't we, if we were going to?
Can we pause just a second? Right, we're good. We have collectively we've missed out a stage on this because we haven't moved on to that. We were still on officer questions to officers. What we hadn't done is gone on to debate. So, with apologies to the members of the public, we do honestly know what we're doing eventually. James does. Thank you, James. Right. On that point, I think we've asked questions to officers. So we'll move on. We'll move in the direction of debate. So the officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Unless members are minded to propose a different recommendation on this item, along with material planning reasons, I shall be proposing that we grant permission. Right. Now, do I move to the next stage, or is this the point, given we know that members have got recommendations? Second up. Yeah, not on here, not on the script. It works the other way around. But may I ask for a seconder?
Second it. Happy to
Councillor
second
Fernand.
there and move the debate on and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. Right. So we have a mover and a second. So we now have a motion on the table. So I believe there may be some amendments. Councillor Tyson.
On condition 12, I would like it to be specified that there should be a height of 2.5 metres for the boundary wall, which will be measured from the neighbour's side of the wall. And you can put if viable, if that's necessary, but a minimum height, which is in the applicant's own site plan, which says 2 metres. But preferably 2.5 meters if that's viable after due consideration on both sections of the proposed boundary wall, which, as we know, will be built in Arlesey white bricks.
Yes, so you're suggesting a minimum of 2.5 meters high from the neighbour's side.
I'm suggesting 2.5 meters high, if viable.
Which
If
height?
not,
Because
a minimum of 2 meters. As
I think there's a differential in height, isn't there, between one side and the other? A minimum of 2.5 meters from the lowest point or the highest point? The highest point.
The lowest point of. Yeah, the highest.
The highest point. Fine.
Does it slope?
So maybe are we able to vote on that as a proposed recommendation, proposed amendment?
As I understand it, Councillor Tyson has proposed an amendment to proposed condition 12 that inserts the provision that the minimum height for along the boundary wall with the adjacent house be no less than 2.5 meters from the highest point. That would be inserted into the condition. which currently indicates that details of the height of proposed boundary treatment shall be submitted, and inserting after they're submitted would be, and the height of would be no less than 2.5 meters from the highest point.
Right. Now, on this point, does the committee need to vote, or can I, as the proposer, and Emma as the seconder of the substantive motion, can we accept that?
I think what would happen would be the vote would be on the proposed amendment to the condition, based upon accepting the recommendations, subject to these amendments to the recommended condition. Councillor Tyson also mentioned the proposed amendment to condition 11. If you would like to remind us of that, we'll make.
So a proposed amendment to condition 11 to read that there shall be no motion activated security lighting, and that there will be set times of operation for any communal, any lighting in communal areas such as the parking court.
Okay. And I think Councillor Brown had a third proposal.
I've got a feeling, I'm sure the officer will tell me, that you can't do that because it's not the windows that overlook, it's the garden, is it? Yeah. So you can't obscure a garden, so.
I think the windows that were of concern that was raised by the neighbours related to Unit 3, which from my measurements is over 30 metres away from the boundary to the property.
Okay.
So I'm not sure it would be
No, over 30 metres is a long way, yeah. Okay, so I will withdraw that suggestion since it's not viable.
Okay. Now, as I understand it, we are now going to move to a vote. We've had a second. A second. Councillor McDonald first.
I don't want to complicate things even further, but this is sort of half my point of debate and half something as a condition is I think this is a really strange application because, and I love to cut grass at my house, but honestly, if I was walking from the garden of plot 2 to the second garden of plot 2 with my lawnmower, I would be putting fake grass down in one of those areas. And that really takes away from the fact that this is a rural setting and should not have fake grass. I don't know whether we can say you're not allowed fake grass, because it's exactly what I would be doing on this.
I'll bow to Sean's superior judgment, but I suspect we can't.
The landscaping scheme shown is the landscaping scheme that we would approve, which includes provision of lawn. It doesn't propose fake grass. There would, at a later date, be nothing at this stage to prevent future owners from replacing that with fake grass, and I'm not sure it would be reasonable to restrict that. But that's something that I need to think about, and we'd probably have to have a very brief pause in order to do so.
Councillor Fernandez.
This is another thing that has come up in the course of discussions, and is something that's been raised as an objection, is the colour of the render. If we are going to approve an amended approval for this development to go forward, is that something that could be looked at again, and potentially a colour that is more sympathetic with the surrounding area to be specified, like buff, to match the Arlesey white bricks rather than red, which doesn't seem to have any reference to any of the other buildings in the area. Is that something that could be changed at this point?
I think it would be quite difficult to do so because we've already approved that colour render, and it's the fallback position against which we're assessing the proposal. The question is, would it be reasonable to do so? And I don't believe that it would, because of what's already been approved. But if members wish to do so, then that's within your purview, is my understanding. You can come in. Useful.
Okay. So in the interest of understanding where we are, before we move on to other issues, we have had the two proposed conditions from Councillor, which were proposed by Councillor Tyson. Just for the record, Councillor Brown, were you happy to second both of those? That's to recommendation 11 and 12. Conditions 11 and
Yes,
12.
for simplicity, since I did the first one, I might as well second the second one.
Right. So for the minutes, Councillor. So we're going to vote on accepting those amended conditions. But first, you have an opportunity to debate if we need further debate on it. On the conditions. This is simply on the conditions now. Right. Okay. So you're voting if you wish to accept the two proposed additional conditions. You're not voting on the application. Before we vote, I've got Councillor Mantle and then Councillor Tyson. Sorry.
Yeah. I think before we talk about the amendments, we are losing sight of the basic principle that if we don't approve, this application is before us, gives us an opportunity to do a few tinkering things which we wouldn't have had otherwise. If we don't want to grant what they're asking for, which effectively is the gardens, then we can't change any of the conditions. So the first decision is, do we actually want to approve this application? If we do, then with what conditions? I think we're getting it a little bit about the wrong way around.
Nazanin.
Thank you, Councillor. So we would have to take a vote on any amendments to the conditions before we vote on the planning application, because once a vote on the planning application has been taken, we're unable to go back and make amendments to the conditions. So it doesn't mean that members have made a decision on the way they vote. They would just say if there was a majority or a unanimous vote to the planning application, it would be with the proposed amendments to the conditions. So that doesn't mean members have to vote one way or another. It's just if it's granted, it will be with the amendments to the condition. But we do have to vote on those amendments first before the substantive vote. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson.
Yeah, I just wanted to check that if we voting on these proposed amendments to the conditions doesn't stop us then going back to consider Councillor Fernandez's proposal. Okay, thank you.
We're just trying to do stuff
Yeah,
at a time. But is there any further debate on Councillor Tyson's two proposed amended conditions? In which case we are voting on the amended conditions.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you. So we are still in debate on the proposal. So I believe we have further debate or any further proposed additional conditions or amended conditions. Councillor Prescott.
An interesting point was made by one of the public speakers, and I think it bears consideration in that there's obviously a reason why the developer has come back with this second application. It's a substantial piece of work to create larger gardens. One of the public speakers made the point that there is always a chance that the developer may choose not to carry out the fallback position if we vote against this application. Because in a commercial environment, they may feel that the application that they got through originally under the conditions that they got it, and I don't mean the planning conditions, but conditions in which they got it, although they managed to get their permission, they actually probably don't want to build it because they don't think they can sell the houses. And which is why they've returned to go through this whole palaver all over again to get the large gardens. And it's a valid point. I'm not suggesting it's a justification or otherwise for us to refuse now, but I think we need to bear in mind that when we say if we refuse this one, they will build the original one, I'm not entirely sure they will.
I suggest we don't get too much into speculating on what a developer may or may not do. I have three speakers. Councillor Fernandez.
I'd just like to suggest what I said before, that if possible, we could specify a different colour of render that is more in sympathy with the surrounding buildings to match Arlesey Whites rather than red as a condition if the planning is approved. Yeah.
I'm looking at Sean, but that looks fairly clear cut as a.
Yes, it would be in the form of an additional condition. That would be condition 13, which would say along the following lines: notwithstanding the details submitted in the identified in the submitted drawings, that proposing external render in red brick, this permission shall not include external render in red brick, and details of an alternative external render shall be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority. And the reason for that condition would refer to the acceptability of the red render, and that a more suitable colour to reflect the Arlesey white brick would be more in keeping with the character of the appearance of the area. So the reason would indicate what we're looking for. The condition will basically exclude red render from the approved scheme. Yeah.
I've Councillor Bryant, were you indicating that the
Councillor Fernandez, and it would not cost a penny more to the developers, just different colour. I'll second it, please.
Yes, I was about to say, does that mean you're seconding it? So Councillor Bryant is seconding Councillor Fernandez' thing. Councillor McDonnell.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the points that I raised earlier. I just find this such an odd layout, and why, when coming back with a full brand new application, that actually it isn't more in keeping with this very rural sort of farm landscape. The layout, it's just so odd. Bits of houses overlooking somebody else's garden, and it's just really weird. It also seems like quite.
Sorry, are you speaking on this one about the render? Because I would like to move this one to a vote, and then we'll want to take them one at a time, because otherwise, for the officer's sake and for everybody else's sake, we need to make sure we have these recorded. So, does anybody else want to debate Councillor Fernandez? Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm fully supportive of Councillor Fernandez's condition. However, I think we need to add into that there are 2 garden walls proposed on the plan, and I think in the landscape plan they are described as being painted terracotta, and I'm just wondering if they should be included in the same condition to have a more sympathetic colour of render or paintwork.
So I'm first going to ask Sean whether that is a reasonable.
Yes, it could be included in that condition to exclude the colour of those proposed. Which walls were we talking about, Councillor Tyson?
The walls that separate the gardens of units 3 and 2 and 2 and 1 respectively.
So, in which case, I'm going to ask Councillor Fernandez, are you prepared to accept that amendment?
Yeah.
And Councillor Bryant is seconder, both prepared to accept that.
Yes.
Any other discussion on that?
No.
Because Councillor Prescott is poised to vote. So can I ask, sorry, if I have no further debate, if we can vote on whether we wish to put forward that amended additional condition 13.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, that's also carried.
Fine. So, Councillor McDonnell, I rudely interrupted you in mid-flow. Would you wish to continue?
Thank you. So I will get this out at some point. I think this is a strange layout, right? Because sorry. Because they've come back with a brand new application, I'm really confused as to why they've just put it on the same, because it's not under permitted development, right? They could have sent an application doing whatever. So I'm just really confused as to why they've done that. There's family homes here, lovely large gardens for children to play in, and yet it's on this road that is not suitable according to highways, and they've objected to that. Transport is, if there's children on this site, they're all going to have to be driven to school because there's clearly no bus. No amenities around here. Again, football clubs and all sorts are all going to have to be driven to. I just find it really strange when we're looking so hard at sustainable travel. The bits of the garden, and again, I come back to this point of how you're going to have to walk around the whole block to, mow bits of your grass. I just find it all very odd, very odd. When actually this is a great piece of land. There is a lot of land where they could have put 8 really nice houses with nice gardens and not been buffering up against walls or the neighbouring properties or whatever, and been a bit more sympathetic to not this car park in the middle of the development. Anyway, I just think it's very odd, and I actually don't know whether I'm going to vote yes or no for this because I'm confused.
Thank you, Councillor McDonnell. Do we have any further contributions to the discussion? Councillor Mantle.
Yes, it's back again. I think if this were before us as a virgin application, I think there's little doubt it would not have received any sort of recommendation of approval. That's what we were told before by the development manager. So the issue is, are we happy that the modifications which we've got are sufficient to, or would we wish to basically tell the applicant, you're stuck with the development you've already got permission for? And I think that is actually the question.
That was a positively Shakespearean contribution from Councillor Mantle there at the end. Councillor Prescott.
Well, Councillor Mantle put much more eloquently what I was actually trying to say earlier on. I don't particularly like this development. There are a number of reasons for that, and they've been well discussed here this evening. I think the highways point is inescapable. And as Councillor Mantle says, if this had been presented as I hate to use the expression, a virgin application, I don't think we'd approve it. And I don't actually know why we would be approving this one now anyway. And I think the point is well made. Tell the developer, if you don't want to build the one you've got permission for, then go back to the drawing board.
Councillor Billing.
just have concerns about that approach, because if we revert to the original application, then we don't get the white brick, we don't get the issues with the lighting sorted out, and we don't get the issue with the wall heightened.
Yeah. That's the decision we've got to make.
Okay. If I may comment myself, I think along the lines Councillor Billings just said is what was going through my mind. I think we need to keep cognizance of what the options are, which is to vote for this application, the amended application we have in front of us, with the addition, hopefully, the change conditions, added conditions that we've made, or it will revert to the fallback position. And despite what Councillor Prescott said earlier, we have absolutely no idea whether that would be built or not. Councillor May.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm as puzzled as other people have expressed this evening around this application. I'm thinking about the people that we don't know whether it would be built if we don't accept this. You know, if they had to go back to the original application, we don't know. That's an uncertainty. And I'm thinking about the families that, if they did build it, what life, what their lives would be like as well in that building without any outside space. So I'm really conflicted about where, which way to vote here. Because some of the houses are sort of 3 and 4 bedrooms where you'd expect families to be. We've already mentioned, needing cars to get the children to school, for example, but also what about outside space for them to play in as well? Yeah, I just thought I'd raise that as well.
Yep. Do we have... Yes, Councillor Fernandez.
I think I'm minded to support the amended application, partly because if we don't, it falls back to the fallback position, which doesn't have all the mitigations that we've just put in. Plus, it's also preserving, it's a way of maintaining and preserving sort of historic farm buildings. If this doesn't get built, it's fairly unsightly at the moment. Is it all just going to fall down? I think this is a good reuse of the buildings, and it does offer 8 dwellings, which we are very short of in our area.
Councillor Winstanley.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Councillor Fernandez just said, and also coming back to Councillor McDonald's, Councillor May's point earlier on. These properties will appeal to some people. It may not appeal to people with children who are going to football clubs, etc. But no one's forcing people to live in these houses. They will be choosing to live there, I assume. So they'll know what they're buying or renting when they choose to buy or rent them.
Okay. Do we have any further debate? No. In which case, we will move to vote on the application. That includes the amended conditions 11 and 12 and the additional condition 13. So we're all clear what we're voting on. The substantive motion as amended. May I see those in favour of granting? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. The substantive motion is carried.
Thank you. I am going to call a 5-minute break at that point. And I wanted some praise from Martin Prescott. Right. 5 minutes.
Was it MK? I think.
Oh, they'll be asleep now.
Hey, are we sitting comfortably? Sorry? You're cold. Okay. We'll move about. Do you have a seconder for that proposal, Councillor Mantle? Right. Right. Are people too cold now? Okay. Item 7, planning appeals. Sean Greaves to present. Sean.
Chair, just bear with me whilst I find the page on our website. Sorry about this. So we have just we've got no appeals decisions. We've got just one appeal lodged. I believe. Is that right? Oh no, we've got one appeal decision. My laptop's yeah. We've got one appeal decision which was dismissed, which related to a first floor rear extension to a 1-bedroom flat in Letchworth.
Royston.
Royston.
Yeah, there's a misprint.
Right.
It's the, it says, I think it's the old schoolhouse, isn't it? The old schoolhouse.
Yes, that's right. That's in Royston, not Letchworth. So the site address is incorrect. So thank you. And that's the appeal decision is attached to it, and it is 4 Market Hill, Royston is the address. Thank you. This is
Do members have any questions for Sean? No? Right, that's an information note, no vote required. Item 9 on our changed order. Exclusion of press and public. I propose under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting on the grounds that the following report will involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 7 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act as amended. May I have a seconder? Councillor Mantle, thank you. Can I see all those in favour of excluding press and public?
Thank you, Chair. That motion's carried. If you can just wait 2 seconds while we move into private session.
Okay, we're back. So item 8 is information at planning enforcement annual report to 25-21. We're now back in part 1. Christella, did you have your report?
Chair, just to confirm that this report is for noting. I would also just like to report on enforcement notices that have been served so far. So we've got one for Breachwood Green, which is in respect of a car park and hard standing. The planning appeal was dismissed for that particular site. Another enforcement notice has been served in respect of the George Bulldog, which relates to the unauthorised change of use of the premises to flats. And the third enforcement notice has been served on 4C Sun Street in respect of alterations to fenestration in a conservation area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do members have any questions to Christella on this report? No. Information note and no vote is required. So I think we've reached the end of the meeting. So thank you to the officers and everyone who submitted. Thanks to the committee for bearing with that quite long item earlier. I think we got there. And we close the meeting. Our next meeting is on the 12th of February. We almost made it to Valentine's Day, but there we go.